Police say they don't know where he is. They don't know what happened. All of Sebastian's parents have cooperated, his mother, Katie Proudfoot, his stepfather, Chris Proudfoot, and his dad, Seth ROGERS. They also say there's no sign of foul play. But people don't just vanish.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. 15-year-old Sebastian is believed to have walked off from his home in the Shackle Island community of Sumner County, that's in Tennessee, in the middle of the night. That's February 25th going into February 26th, Sunday going into Monday. That's according to his mother and stepfather, Katie and Chris Proudfoot. But 6 weeks later, following a massive search, the little boy who has autism, high-functioning autism, hasn't been found. In this analysis, I want to share the evolution of my initial thoughts on this case. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. I hope you guys have noticed the new banner, new branding on the top of my channel. One of the things I've been showing is just the most popular books for the month: Christmas Star, Neverest, and The Man Underneath, Christopher Watts. Let me know what you think of it. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So, circumstances. What I want to do is take you through how we begin to think and process when it comes to a brand new case. And I think the basic thing is, on the one hand, we want to keep an open mind. We want to gather information and remain curious. We want to get to know these people, get to know the little boy, get to know his mother, get to know his stepfather, get to know his biological father, get to know the terrain, get to know the topography, get to know the situation. On the other hand, we also want to start tying some of the circumstances into the sorts of patterns, what we in the TCRS camp refer to as intertextualities, and see if they take us anywhere. We also don't want to get bogged down by these intertextualities so that we don't open ourselves up to further information. So we do want to start walking down a path. We want to be open to signposts along the way, but also slowly start to make our way to somewhere specific. So the first thing I noticed while scanning through the footage was this image. There's a lot of water in the background. This youngster disappeared late at night on foot, and due to a medical condition, it seems he may have difficulty navigating or finding his way around. That's, of course, if we rely on the narrative. The reference to his home in the Shackle Island community seems to confirm this impression of a boy living in a home that's surrounded by water, or certainly that there's water nearby. There's also a reference to in the middle of the night. Now, the combination of walking, the middle of the night, and nearby water makes it easy to draw an initial inference. Certainly in all the cases I've dealt with in the UK of women going missing by rivers, it's just almost easily to go to a default conclusion there, that the most likely scenario given this first glimpse is that the little boy drowned. Statistics also reinforce this notion. And ironically enough, the same river that Riley Strain was found in, the Cumberland River, snakes right by Hendersonville. So isn't that it? Is it quite easily done? That is what happened. But Riley Strain was found in the river after just 2 weeks. More than 3 times as much time has passed since Sebastian vanished in late February, and it's this aspect, not so much the vanishing, but the vanishing without a trace, that raises concern. God knows people who fall into water can be hard to find without foul play being a factor. Weeks can become months, and some people who fall into water are never found. A case in the United Kingdom recently, Gloria Clark, an 8-year-old, entered a river, Police knew exactly where and also when she entered the river because it was captured on CCTV, and yet her body was still only found more than 2 months later. That could be the case here, except there's something that's bothering me.
He hasn't been on his medication in 20 days. So he is rambunctious. He's got to be hungry. He turns into a bottomless pit. I mean, he's your teenage boy, you know, always hungry. On the spectrum, yes. But not one autistic child in this world is like another one. What we can tell you is he's smart. He can be goofy. He kind of has issues with personal space. He hasn't mastered.
He can be
up in your face kind of kid.
He can be aggressive if he's upset.
Yeah. He's emotional. He's a teenager.
He doesn't like punch and hit and throw, but he gets really like aggressive stanced or like clipped where he just won't talk to you, or you know, if he's really upset, he like growls.
That comes from the Chronicles of Olivia YouTube channel. They interviewed Katie and Chris Proudfoot, and there are two statements that were made there that I really didn't like hearing. The one was bottom of a pit.
He turns into a bottomless pit.
The other thing that I found interesting is him referring in a very global way to him as kind of a boy in the world.
One autistic child in this world is like another one.
As soon as you're thinking in terms of in this world, you are thinking in very absolute terms, and that can also be how one thinks about life and death. Now, at first glance, Sebastian's mother's narrative doesn't really raise any eyebrows. She says that he's very smart, is not a mischievous child, and yet when you hear his stepfather talking about him, you kind of get a different sense. So when she tells the story, it's almost too good to be true. In fact, it is too good to be true. Leading up to his disappearance, his mother told the YouTube channel that, they had a day, it was a normal day, it was filled with laughter. They ate a colossal amount of popcorn and they took a trip around town. Her son took out the trash at the end of the driveway. This was his usual chore, and then at 9 p.m. he was told to go to bed. He was doing something in his room because about an hour later I heard some noise, and I was like, I don't care what you're doing in there, but go to sleep. At 6 o'clock I went to wake him up for school Monday morning, and that's when he wasn't there. I didn't see him in his room. I looked all over. I ran through the whole house. I looked out the doors and windows, and I was like hollering his name. I jumped in my car and I drove around the neighborhood, and I drove over by the school, and like at this point I was like hysterical, and I was crying, I was screaming. It was at that point that her husband phoned law enforcement, but 20 days later we haven't found him. His mother and stepfather described him as not a child that wanders. Now the first problem to me isn't so much the mother's story, but how she tells it. She laughs, she tells a funny story, she seems more amused than worried. That's simply my impression. It gets worse when the stepfather speaks, because then it turns out there are some behavioral issues. At second glance, the mother's narrative is actually quite concerning. The last thing she remembers is him going outside to take out the trash. That's her last memory of her son. As such, the cops searched a local garbage fill without success. She also mentions hearing a muffled thud. She said a thud that when she called out to her son, he replied, and then she told him to go to sleep. Now, I'm not sure if this thud is supposed to mean within the contrivance of the story, a window that's opening or closing, or some stranger in the house, but within the contrivance, she places herself somewhere else when it happens. It's also interesting that in her own story, they don't seem to be together. I'm talking about at the end of the evening, and we don't get a real sense of Sebastian saying anything specific. I don't think she mentions him having dinner either. It's interesting that the stepfather talks about him eating constantly. Essentially, the last thing his mother does is tell Sebastian to go to sleep. One wonders whether this is symbolic of the wider dynamic, that the parents want this child to go to sleep. Now let's deal with the family dynamic. Without going into too much detail, a scenario of a broken home where one of the biological parents is absent and there is another step-parent taking their place, this is seldom a good development for young children. We saw this recently with the Texas girl Audrey Cunningham. The other aspect is autism, which could factor into potential criminal psychology. A child with autism may involve more maintenance and may be more expensive and difficult to look after. This may be a gripe in particular for the parent who's not the biological parent. In the past week, her biological father, Seth Rogers, has told Court TV that his mom is responsible for this.
His mother was the last one to see him. She's responsible for this.
Meanwhile, Katie Proudfoot, she thinks that someone has taken her son. She basically says, so much time has gone by. What other reasonable explanation could there be? She also says, I feel like if he had been close to the house or had walked off, that we would have found him by now, with as many people as have been searching. Meanwhile, some video has emerged showing lights late at night in the area, but this appears to have been manufactured. Well, I'm not sure if it's manufactured by social media, but the local police certainly aren't taking it seriously. So that brings us to the question, is this an accident or foul play? As mentioned earlier, the length of time Sebastian has been missing now, that's a serious issue, and one has to at least consider a possibility that something deliberate occurred and that he's missing because he's been deliberately hidden. He's deliberately being held out of sight. For me, the biggest red flag is the lack of affect from his mother and stepfather. I also don't like the fact that this happened on a Sunday night going into a Monday morning. I also don't like those references to bottomless pit and the reference to child with autism in the world. If things were unraveling on the home front, they would do so more of a weekend than a weekday when everyone is too busy to get in one another's way, and the unraveling would peak on Sunday night. That's what happened in the Chris Watts case, and that's exactly when Sebastian disappeared. There would also be ample opportunity to plan and execute a crime over a weekend. At the same time, if he walked off and fell into water, a significant amount of time could pass without him being found. Of the two scenarios, I'm leaning, unfortunately, to the former. I'm cautious because the police don't seem to think foul play is a factor here, but they're also not ruling it out completely either. Meanwhile, Seth Rogers is calling in the cavalry. He is hoping the case will soon be investigated by the FBI. Definitely quite a difficult one. We will keep tabs on this mysterious case. Thank you for listening. I'll be continuing my analysis of the Amanda Knox email, so look out for that, and I'll see you guys next time.